people who wonder whether they will ever love a robot, I would say, I hope so, because you will be a robot. In a sense, all of us already are robots. We're meat robots. There's a certain conscious experience associated with the configuration of molecules that makes up a human body. In a similar way, a robot, a computer, it's a configuration of molecules, of particles, and I see no reason why the configuration of molecules constituting an engineered robot cannot have consciousness in the same sense that the molecules constituting an evolved biological body has. And in the end, as we repair our brains with nanobots, and as we advance brain-computer interfacing, hybridizing ourselves with localized and networked machines, in the end, the distinction between an organic, evolved robot, such as I am right now, and an engineered robot made of silicon, metal, and whatever other funky compounds are invented, this distinction will probably not seem so meaningful anymore. It's all just configurations of matter endowed with sparks of consciousness, and it will take many, many different forms as technology evolves.
As artificial intelligence and robotics technologies become more pervasive in our contemporary society, we are forced to ask ourselves the most profound existential question of what it means to be human in the first place. Is our basic organic physiology the manifestation of an animated robotic invention? As well, how do we account for the awareness expressed by this animated organic form we call human? Is consciousness simply a mechanical neurochemical process of the human brain? A mundane electronic process that artificial intelligence can be programmed to mimic? Or does the human body actually provide an avatar vehicle for a non-physical awareness to experience this particular 3D virtual reality world? A soul, in other words. This debate inevitably raises an even more profound question: is the world of our daily human experience itself actually real? Or, as humans, are we in fact artificial entities performing in an artificial virtual reality drama? As advanced quantum physicists look deeper into the subatomic fabric of our world, they discover at the most basic fundamental level a lattice of ones and zeros, not unlike the fundamental codes of a computer program. An astounding revelation that implies our subjective daily life experience is no more than a simulacrum, a virtual reality.
Are you saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers?
That is correct.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code. You're saying it is computer code.
That's what we find very, very deeply inside the equations.
You find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
You look at our computing power today, and you say, I have the power to program a world inside of a computer. Well, imagine in the future where you have even more power than that, and you can create characters that have, for example, free will, or their own perception of free will. And I program in the laws that govern that world. That world will have its own laws of physics and chemistry and biology. Now, you're a character in that world, and you think you have free will, and you say, I want to invent a computer, so you do. Hey, I want to create a world in my computer. Then that world creates a world in its computer. And then you have simulations all the way down. Simulating universes becomes a pastime among those who have access to highly powerful computers. And we are in a universe
we are probably in a simulated universe, even if one of those universes is actually real.
This universe could have been created by some super intelligence in another universe. So maybe our whole universe is a junior high school science experiment of some super intelligent junior high school student in another universe, and maybe she won't get such a good grade given the way things are going.
And remember, like the strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, I think is the following: that 40 years ago we had Pong, like 2 rectangles and a dot. That was what games were. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality. Just indistinguishable. Even if that rate of advancement drops by 1,000 from what it is right now, then you just say, okay, well, let's imagine it's 10,000 years in the future, which is nothing in the evolutionary scale. So given that we're clearly on a trajectory to have games that are indistinguishable from reality, and those games could be played on any set-top box or on a PC or whatever, and there would probably be, billions of such, computers or set-top boxes, it would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions.
So
tell me what's wrong with that argument.
Is the answer yes?
The argument is probably. It's like, is there a flaw in that argument?
I mean, someone.
I'm not sure what the error.
No. The argument makes sense. So the assumption then is that somebody beat us to it, and this is a game.
No. There's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality.
Oh, okay. What do you think?
Well, I think it's 1 in billions.
Okay. Yeah,
that seems to be like clearly what it suggests.
Right.
And actually, I mean, arguably, we should hope that that's true, because otherwise, if civilization stops advancing, then that may be due to some calamitous event that erases civilization. So maybe we should be hopeful that this is a simulation, because otherwise...
So they could reboot it.
Well, otherwise, either we're going to create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, or civilization will cease to exist. Those are 2 options.
Somebody has a joystick somewhere else in some other... You know where I'm going with
it. It certainly doesn't feel like that. I mean, I don't think I'm being played by somebody in a video game. But then people in video games don't generally think that.
I certainly think if you talk to people who use the latest virtual reality equipment in sort of a big space where they sort of map like benches in the space to benches in the game and the environment, they have this experience when they do that for the first time, and then they take it off, and then they just freeze for 10 seconds. And then you talk to them, and it's clear that like their belief that this is actual reality has been shaken, because they were so convinced in virtual reality that was real. And so if I can take this off, like, why aren't there other layers?
50 years from now, the fidelity of these systems is going to be to the point where you can't tell what's real and what's not.
Given that the human brain's capacity for processing high volumes of visual data makes the virtual reality of our world so compelling, this high-volume data processing perhaps explains the extraordinary success of Hollywood film entertainment. For a century, the motion picture industry has been providing an endless variety of virtual reality visual scenarios to a global audience voracious for such diversions. With their visual attention focused on the moving images in a darkened theater, audiences vicariously engage themselves with the action on the screen. Today, visual entertainment technologies with advanced virtual reality headsets allow the viewer to engage a full 360-degree video world to experience. And as this technology continues to progress exponentially, At what point will it become so sophisticated as to allow the viewer to directly interface their consciousness with the video scenario's virtual characters? A point where the video experience becomes indistinguishable from the real world.
If you got to 2045, we'll be spending most of our time in virtual reality. Right now, people spend some of their time in virtual reality environments, virtual worlds like Second Life. Today doesn't look as real as real reality, but if you look at video games and look at how we've gone from Pong up to fairly realistic renditions today, same thing will happen in these virtual reality environments.
These sort of exponential trends that Ray talks about are nowhere more visible than in a place like Second Life, where exponential growth has dominated without variation. It's interesting to see this sort of exponential growth phenomena applied to a world, and realize, of course, that the virtual world is the one growing exponentially, where the real world, of course, is not.
Ultimately, this virtual reality will go inside the brain, and then we really will be full immersion with all of the senses. Virtual reality ultimately will have all of the features of real reality, plus a lot more that you can choose from millions of virtual environments. You can be someone else. You don't have to pick the same boring body every time. You can be different people in different situations. And over time, our biological bodies will become obsolete. We'll have many bodies. And we'll look back to the idea of having one body and being dependent on this one biological body and having no backup for our mind file as a very primitive time.
When we look at objects, we see them as they are. A table, a pencil, a car. Some of us even know that when we look at these objects under a fine microscope, we see electrons and atoms moving around. But when we look at these objects on a level even deeper than the electron, we see pure, vibrating, and pulsating energy or life force. No matter what we look at in our world and in our universe, we discover the same thing, that everything is made up of this same vibrating energy. Even more interestingly, quantum physics is showing us that all of the energy that exists in the universe is all interconnected and is affected by actions that take place in the universe, whether it be cosmic or human related. It is important to realize that everything in our universe is made up of the exact same energy and is always connected. So when it is said that everything is energy, what is really being said is that to the naked eye, although things seem solid and are solid, at their deepest observable level, they are vibrating energy, and this energy is interconnected throughout the entire universe.
Are you saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers?
That is correct.
So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos?
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code?
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code, you're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. I have, in my life, come to a very strange place because I never expected that the movie The Matrix might be an accurate representation of the place in which I live.
Let me According to Hinduism, however, we already live in a kind of virtual reality. see our world as a phantom, as a veil, or Maya in Sanskrit, that covers the real world and that hinders us from seeing it.
In other words, this could be a simulation running on a universal computer. You could say in one sense that Maya is a kind of virtual reality, a world of illusion, which is intended basically as an educational system for the souls.
Hindu people believe that the soul is separate from the body, that it leaves the body after death, and then reincarnates in another body. What body you will reincarnate into depends on how well you develop your mind in your present life. There is a strict hierarchy of all creatures, and among humans, that is reflected in their rigid caste system. But Hindus also believe that there are higher beings that are already living now, and you can become one of them in your next life if you improve yourself considerably at the present stage.
There's no question of the entire society of organisms progressing to a higher stage, because the higher stage actually is already in existence.
This self-improvement is done by yoga practice. There are 64 steps in yoga, called the 64 cities, that ultimately allow you to break through the veil of this reality and bring you in contact with the world behind it.
Today, quantum physics confirms that our world, at its deepest subatomic level, consists of pure energy. But this realization was fully understood by ancient mystics of remote antiquity, that our collective virtual reality life experience manifests from a universal ocean of pure energy they called ether. Esoteric traditions of both ancient Egyptian and Mexican mystery schools contain striking insights that reveal our world to be a virtual reality construct. In a series of best-selling books by UCLA anthropologist Carlos Castaneda, he describes his study of the shamanic traditions of ancient Central American cultures. His claim to a personal encounter with Yaqui Indian shaman Don Juan Matus in 1960 launched his apprenticeship into an alternate universal cosmology that parallels modern quantum physics discoveries. This Yaqui shaman explained to Castaneda that our mind's cognition requires the interpretation of sensory data. He said that the universe is composed of an infinite number of energy fields that exist in the universe as luminous filaments. These luminous filaments act on man as an organism. The response of the organism is to interpret these energy fields as sensory data. The mind's interpretation of that sensory data becomes our cognitive system, or simply stated, our daily virtual reality experience. However, Castaneda's shaman mentor cautioned our cognitive processes have been hijacked by hostile alien entities. Humanity has been tricked into perpetually manifesting a reality of alien invention, a mental prison, or cattle pen, if you will, where these predatory aliens maintain this illusory world to use humanity as their perpetual food source. Gnostic research of author John Lash in his book, Not in His Image, leather-bound papyrus codices recovered from a cave west of the Nile in 1945 contain 3,000-year-old Gnostic texts that also reveal humans of Earth were prisoners in a simulacrum, a virtual reality created by hostile, parasitic aliens. Called the Nag Hammadi Scrolls, this material contains reports of visionary experiences of the initiates, including first-hand encounters with inorganic beings called Archons, beings that emerged in the solar system prior to the formation of Earth. In Gnostic terms, the replication of nature in lifeless form exemplifies archonic simulation. Archons cannot originate anything, but they can imitate, copy, duplicate. Their mimetic capacity is called phantasia, to distinguish it from the real-life animating power of higher spiritual entities called aeons. The virtual realities or celestial mansions the Archons contrive are called stereoma, or stereometric projection, like a holograph of a living thing. The holographic images is not alive, but it can represent a copy of something that is. Gnostic cosmological texts explain that the many-mansioned heaven of these alien parasites is a virtual cosmos, a virtual reality world. In Gnosticism and other theological systems, the Demiurge is defined as a heavenly being subordinate to the supreme being. Demiurge is considered to be the controller of the material world and antagonistic to all that is purely spiritual. Although perceived as an evil overlord entity, the Demiurge, as master of our virtual reality world, suspiciously functions more like an omnipresent artificial intelligence algorithm that manages our virtual world matrix system, a fully autonomous AI system not unlike Marvel Comics' uber-robot villain, Ultron.
The central brain of the Matrix control system, known by the ancients as the Demiurge. The Demiurge is said to be the soul of the universe. It is the all-pervading energy field that projects matter, energy, space, and time at the quantum level. The Demiurge is a non-physical artificial intelligence that in its original and rightful form fashioned physicality according to the divine will, except it has since broken away from the divine framework and become a parasite upon its own corner of creation, which is the universe we now find ourselves in. The Demiurge has shaped this universe into a cold, deterministic machine, a construct that perpetuates the illusion of linear time, that grinds onward without regard for the consciousness of its inhabitants, and that forces its subjects to live by the law of the jungle. These spiritually suffocating conditions are what allow the Matrix control system to exist. They lead to a mode of living that favors serving self at the expense of others. What was supposed to have been a nurturing womb, a growth matrix for the evolution of consciousness through physical experience, has instead taken on overtones of a spiritual prison. The second component of the Matrix includes all the non-physical beings that have taken after the Demiurge. In a realm of limited resources, there will be those who have developed competition, predation, and survival to a high art. Such beings are spiritually dead and cut off from the divine. They look to the living, such as ourselves, for their source of energy and entertainment. The more powerful ones, whom the Gnostics termed Archons, may be viewed as the henchmen of the corrupt Demiurge. Here on Earth, they preside over a network of negative entities that farm us for our soul energy. This network includes demons, parasitic thought forms generated by human suffering and perversion, as well as ghosts working in the service of demons. They are all non-physical predators that roam around and instigate human suffering at every opportunity, mainly to feed off the soul energy released. They are energy feeders, mind manipulators, and tormentors that play us like fiddles if we are not aware. They can orchestrate misleading synchronicities, create accidents and freak illnesses, insert foreign thoughts and emotions into us during lowered states of consciousness, and they can induce schizoid symptoms in the vulnerable, By default, the odds are already stacked in the control system's favor. We perceive just enough to graze around the cattle farm, but not so much that we easily find a way out.
Our World Matrix drama allows participants to experience the illusion of free will, but much like a video game, our human lives are pre-programmed performances repeating in endless variation. According to author-researcher David Icke, the five-sense world that we daily experience is a time loop that goes around and around, basically repeating the same sequence in theme, if not in detail. What we call the future eventually becomes the past and spins around to repeat the present over and over. A description that sounds very much like a super sophisticated software algorithm that computer engineers are actually designing right now. A fact that might explain why brilliant physicists like Professor Sylvester James Gates Jr. have detected a matrix code in the deepest mathematical equations that describe our own so-called reality. Aside from sophisticated video gaming, what if an autonomous artificial intelligence system began designing its own virtual realities? Realities indistinguishable from the 3D world we already know. Artificial intelligence engineers today admit designing computer programs that have the potential to evolve into fully autonomous systems capable of exponential growth to levels of cognition totally beyond human understanding. Autonomous systems comparable to virtual reality gods.
Right, so imagine we just built a super intelligent AI, right, that was no smarter than your average team of researchers at Stanford or at MIT. Well, electronic circuits function about 1 million times faster than biochemical ones. Okay, so this machine should think about 1 million times faster than the minds that built it. So you set it running for a week, and it will perform 20,000 years of human-level intellectual work, week after week after week. How could we even understand, much less constrain, a mind making this sort of progress? But the moment we admit that information processing is the source of intelligence, that some appropriate computational system is what the basis of intelligence is, and we admit that we will improve these systems continuously, and we admit that the horizon of cognition very likely far exceeds what we currently know, then we have to admit that we're in the process of building some sort of God. Now would be a good time to make sure it's a God we can live with. Thank you very much.
Imagine if such complex algorithms began designing their own virtual reality worlds. How long would it take before such a system evolved into a Demiurge overlord to its own collection of virtual reality universes? Author and military analyst Jay Tuck warns us, a lot of people don't seem to be able to comprehend what's coming when we complete artificial general intelligence, something that can reason like a human. And I use the term we loosely, but it won't be us, but the self-reprogramming AI that actually breaks through that barrier, all on its own, without the programmers even knowing exactly how it did it. When we reach that point, it's game over for everything we know. That AI will be smarter than every human combined and grow exponentially smarter every second. It will know things and be able to do things we couldn't even begin to imagine. And we just have to hope it's benevolent and decides to keep us around of the planet Earth virtual reality experience.
You look at our computing power today, and you say, I have the power to program a world inside of a computer. Well, imagine in the future where you have even more power than that. And you can create characters that have, for example, free will, or their own perception of free will. And I program in the laws that govern that world. That world will have its own laws of physics and chemistry and biology. Now you're a character in that world and you think you have free will, and you say, I want to invent a computer, so you do. Hey, I want to create a world in my computer. Then that world creates a world in its computer. And then you have simulations all the way down.
What is the real real? Is death the only way to actually escape this virtual reality? Or is death simply game over of the particular hologram drama of the moment, to be followed by yet another drama, like Russian dolls nested one inside another, in an infinite succession of virtual reality game scenarios? At some point in this non-stop progression, do we ultimately realize the artificiality of these matrix drama illusions and gain a true perception of ourselves? According to the insights of ancient Central American shamanic tradition, anthropologist Carlos Castaneda states, "We are perceivers, we are unawareness. We are not objects, we have no solidity, we are boundless. The world of objects and solidity is a way of making our passage on earth convenient. It is only a description that was created to help us. We, or rather our reason, forget that the description is only a description, and thus we trap ourselves in a vicious circle from which we rarely emerge in our lifetime. The world that we perceive, though, is an illusion. It was created by a description that was told to us since the moment we were born. Our art as ordinary people is that we know how to hold the image of what we are looking at. We are energetic probes created by the universe, and it's because we are possessors of energy that has awareness that we are the means by which the universe becomes aware of itself."